Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at chapter 8 from the Rhodes Latin textbook and the first story in chapter 8 called Laeca Poeta II. So this is a continuation of the story, a previous story that we saw in chapter 7 about a poet named Laeca. We're going to continue on with his story. It's also a continuation of the grammar, which I'll explain in a minute. Chapter 7 and 8 really flow together, and if you're using my notes on my textbook, you'll see that I kind of gave you all the notes already, but I'll explain a little bit as we go. The main idea of this video is to read the story to you, translate it, or help you translate it rather, and walk you through a little bit of the grammar so that you can understand it better. Before we dive too far in, like I always tell you, if you want to get the story and the chapter information in a different way, feel free to go to Nova Latin. You'll find the story there, the cases highlighted button, the English translation, along with all my grammar notes, practice problems, just everything I've got, different videos that might help you understand the chapter in a little bit better way. It's totally up to you. If you just want to see the actual Road to Latin textbook in a digital format, it's also there unedited too. So take it for what you need it for, and hopefully you find it useful. Before we dive into the grammar, like I always tell you, the first thing, vocab, is the most important thing you can do before you start translating or reading the stories in these chapters. You need to know what the words mean. So take the vocab. If you're using my textbook, I gave you some English derivatives that'll help you to associate some of these Latin words with their English counterparts. That might help you a little bit. Practice however you want. I put quizzes up there if that helps you. But as long as you're feeling pretty confident in most of the vocab words, you can always look up a word in the dictionary if you need to. But it's much easier when you actually know what they mean. Translating without actually having the vocab down is very tricky, and it's something that we really don't want to be doing. So start with the vocab, then you want to dive into the grammar. Like I said, use my grammar notes, use whatever you need. Once you feel comfortable with those two things, read the story out loud. I always tell you this, but it's really important. Find someone you can read the story to, and they can read it back to you so you can practice your speaking and pronunciation when you read, and you're listening when they read it to you. It's really important that you don't shut those parts of your brain off. You never know. You might be more of an auditory learner, and it's going to click better when you hear it. Use everything that you can. Don't shut it off. I know people say Latin is not a spoken language, which is not entirely true. You definitely can speak Latin, and you should, just so you can help with, acquiring the second language. So hopefully that helps you as you go. Once you're in that place and you feel really confident, you're ready to dive into the story, which we'll do in a second. The first thing I want to give you before we dive into the story is just a quick grammar. This slide would look familiar if you watched my chapter 7 video. This chapter is about prepositional phrases, right? You got introduced to the ablative case, but really it was about prepositional phrases, how they work, and really what case the noun will be in a prepositional phrase. So just to give you a quick recap, a prepositional phrase is a preposition which shows relative position and a noun. So it's going to be a word like in, on, under, near, right? That's your preposition. And then you need to be near something, on something, under something. You need a noun. In Latin, that noun is either accusative or ablative case when you're dealing with prepositional phrases, and knowing which one is which really gives you a leg up. Sometimes it's not that easy to tell. You just have to kind of either use the sentence, the context of the sentence rather, or have a lot of practice under your belt. But in general, the accusative case is used to show motion into or toward, and the ablative case is used to show either position or location, where you're just, in or under something, or motion out of or away from something. Now, in chapter 7, the main focus was really on ablative case, right? So I don't think you saw any prepositional phrases using the accusative, but I taught you this rule anyway, and I showed you this diagram that I like to use, the house diagram, which lets you kind of visualize how these all work. In chapter 8, you're going to see a lot more prepositional phrases that involve the accusative case. So there's going to be a lot of motion toward or into something. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. It's a very quick recap. Like I said, on your own, you should just read through the grammar notes of the textbook and make sure you feel comfortable with it, and then you'll be ready to dive into the story, which we're going to do now. So the story starts like this. You have aqua laicam maxime delectat, itaque poeta saepe navigat. So your subject is aqua, the water, and it's really talking about the sea, but we're using the word water here, which is totally fine. So you have the water, delectat, it delights. Maxime means very much or greatly. So who or what does the water delight? We need a direct object. It's laicam. There's your accusative ending. You're saying the water very much delights Laeca, who is the poet, right? You'll remember that from the previous version of this story. Then you have itaque, which means and so. So it's saying the water really delights Laeca. And so the poet, poeta, there's your subject, he often navigat, he often sails, meaning sails on the water, right? Saepe just means often, navigat is your verb meaning he, she, or it sails. Then you have poeta ab Italiae oris, ad proximum insulam libenter navigat. So your subject is poeta. Now you have a kind of interesting phrase, and one that, if I were to write it, I might have switched the word order, but it's totally fine the way it is. It's just the word order might be a little bit confusing if you're reading left to right and not looking at the endings. So let's just take it apart. You have ab Italiae oris. So ab means away from. So if you remember last chapter, whenever you have away from, you're anticipating an ablative noun. But Italiae is not ablative, right? So I'm not saying the poet, in this case, the verb at the very end of the line is navigat, he sails. I'm not saying that he sails away from Italy. I'm saying he sails away from oris, the shores. There's your ablative plural ending. So again, just because Italiae is next to the preposition doesn't necessarily mean it's the one you're looking for. Now, normally in a lot of more, modern textbooks, we would flip this word order around and have it say ab oris Italiae. But it doesn't really matter in terms of the Latin, right? Because word order is not as important in Latin as it is in English. So what is Italiae doing? Well, it's not the subject, because poeta is my subject, right? We can tell because, another way we can tell rather is because the verb is navigat, which means he, she, or it sails. It ends in a T. So if Italiae were the subject, it would be plural. We'd need a verb with an NT ending, right? A plural verb with a plural subject. So it's not your nominative case. So the other options are either genitive or dative. It's not going to be dative here because we're not giving anything or saying anything to or for someone. We don't have one of our adjectives, our special adjectives we've been learning, like cara or grata, right? Dear, or pleasing to someone. We don't have that. So in the context of this sentence, the genitive case is what makes the most sense. You're saying the poet sails, poeta navigat, ab Italiae oris, right? From the shores, the oris, of Italy, Italiae, which makes a lot more sense because they're in Italy, right? Laeca is sailing in Italy, so it kind of makes sense that he'd be sailing away from the shores of Italy, right? So he sails away from the shores. And if you're going away from something, you're probably going toward something else, which is why we have ad here. There's your preposition that means toward. So he sails away from the shores of Italy and toward proximam insulam, a nearby island. If you're looking at the picture to the right, you can see there's Laeca, and he's sailing in his little boat towards an island, right? Libenter means happily, right? So he's happily doing this. But again, the real key here is noticing that we have two different prepositional phrases. Ab, meaning away from, and ad, meaning toward. They're taking different cases for their nouns. Away from takes the ablative, that's why we have oris, ablative plural, and ad proximam insulam is one of our accusative prepositional phrases that we're really focusing on in this chapter. Ad means toward, and motion toward something takes an accusative noun. That's why we have insulam, right? Proximam is just an adjective describing it. So he's going toward the nearby island. Then you continue on, you have multi insulae sunt Italiae proximae. So here's another one of the sentences I always like out of Road to Latin. Every single noun ends in an AE, which is perfect because it means we can practice understanding context of what makes the most sense here. So multi-insulae is your subject, many islands. It makes sense to have a plural subject, they end in AE, because we have a plural verb, sunt, they are. So you're saying many islands are. What are they? They're proximae, they're near. Italiae wouldn't make sense to say many islands are Italy. Like that doesn't, and it wouldn't even be Italy, it would be Italy's, right? Because it would have to be nominative. It just doesn't make any sense. So you're saying many islands are near. Italiae is not your subject. Like I just said, if it were nominative plural, it would mean there's two of them, and there's not two Italys, so it just doesn't make sense. It also isn't going to be genitive, because if that were the case, you'd be saying many islands of Italy are near. Not so much. It doesn't really make a ton of sense, right, to have the islands being belonging to Italy. I know technically the islands do belong to Italy, but dative makes the most sense here because you have this special adjective of proximae, nearby. And it's one of those ones we learn that takes a dative because you're saying you're nearby to something. So when you piece this together, you're saying many islands, multi-insulae, are nearby to proximae, Italiae, Italy. They're near to Italy. It's just trying to say that there's a lot of islands off the coast of Italy, which there are, right? Some big, some small. That's what you're doing here. So it's just a dative case. Then you have navicula ad terras extremas non navigat quod naviculo non est firma. So a navicula is a small boat. Okay, so it's the little boat or the skiff, I think they called it, whatever you want to do. I like little boat, so go with it. The little boat, right? No navigat, it doesn't sail. Then we have another prepositional phrase, ad terras extremas, right? That's accusative plural, which makes sense because you have ad, meaning toward, and toward goes with the accusative case. So you're saying the small boat does not sail to far off lands. Extremas, think extreme in English, means far off. And terras is the word, terra is the word for land, plural, it would mean lands. So it's trying to tell you that you wouldn't take a little raft out into the Mediterranean Sea. You would probably die, more likely than anything. That's not what it's built for, right? It's saying that you can't go off into far off lands, but you can sail to an island, is kind of the idea. So it says, it doesn't sail to far off lands, and it tells you why. You have quod, which means because, right? It's a conjunction, setting up a new clause or new thought or sentence, right? You're saying because the navicula, the ship, non est firma, it's not strong, right? It's not sturdy, firm, however you want to translate firma. It's not sturdy enough to do that, right? The waves would crush you, you die. So it's just saying you sail, you sail to small islands. Then it continues on with this idea of why they're taking the small boat. You have navicula igitor ad Graeciam et ad Asiam non navigat. So the small boat, therefore, igitor means therefore, the small boat, non navigat, doesn't sail ad Graeciam et ad Asiam. There's two more prepositional phrases here. They both start with ad, so they're going to be accusative because you're going towards something. So it's saying it doesn't sail toward Greece and it doesn't sail towards or to Asia, right? Which makes sense, right? There's other places you could sail, obviously, in the Mediterranean, but just saying you're not going that far because you die. So there you go. Okay, a little sailing lesson for you in this chapter. Then you have the next paragraph. You have hodie, poeta in vilam ambulat et Juliam voca. So today, hodie, right? The poet, there's your subject, poeta. What's the poet doing? Ambulat, is walking. In vilam means in the house. But this is interesting. We've seen in vila with a long A, meaning inside the house. This is in vilam. When you use the accusative, you're implying motion into or towards. So the idea here is that the poet is not inside the house. So you don't want to translate this, today the poet is walking in the house. That's not what it means. Because you have vilam, it's implying that he's going into the house, meaning he's outside of it right now, and he's about to go in. So it changes your translation slightly, and this is why paying attention to the cases is so important. With prepositional phrases, the preposition in can go with ablative or accusative. It just means something different depending on what case you use and what you're trying to express if you're writing in Latin, right? So here you're saying the poet is walking into the house, and vocat Juliam, and he calls Julia, right? Remember, Julia, I believe, is his daughter. So he calls Julia, or Juliam, rather. There's your direct object, okay? Then you have tum poeta cum Julia ad oram propera. So then the poet, right, Laeca, the poet is still your subject. The poet, propera, hastens, right? He hustles or he hastens, okay? So then the poet hastens. You have cum Julia. Cum with takes an ablative, which is why you have Julia with the long A there, right? So he hastens with Julia. Where are they going? Ad oram. Ad means toward. You need an accusative case noun, and you've got one here with oram. They're going toward the shore. Again, the accusative is expressing that motion towards something. So the poet with his daughter, he hastens, hustles, everyone say it, to the shore. Poeta et filia ad insula magnam navigant. So now we have a new subject here, not just singular but plural, because you have poeta et filia, the poet and his daughter, right? So the two of them sail, navigant. Notice how navigant has an NT. That's because you have a plural subject. So plural subject, plural verb. They sail, right? So the poet and his daughter sail ad insula magnam. There's another prepositional phrase. It starts with ad as the preposition, which means toward. You're expecting an accusative case noun, and you've got one with insulam. They sail towards the island, and it's the magnam insulam, the big island, okay? So it was talking about how they usually don't sail that far off, but today they're going to a big island, sure. Then you have in magna insula, nauta habitat. So here your subject is nauta, the sailor, right? And that the sailor is living, right? Habitat. So it's saying a sailor, I guess you'd say a sailor, not the sailor, right? But a sailor in magna insula habitat, the sailor lives on a big island or on the big island. This is interesting because, again, we have the preposition in, but it's going with an ablative case noun here, insula, with the long A. That means that he's not, which makes sense. It's not saying he lives into the island, right? He's already on it. So it's not that hard to understand in English, but in Latin, to express that position or location that you're on the island, right? You're already physically on it, you use the ablative. That's why we have magna insula here. So it's saying a sailor lives on the island. Tandem, navicula ad oram insulae. Now we got et Julia e navicula in terram propria. So it means at last, or finally, the little boat, the navicula, right? It sails, now we got, ad oram insulae, to the shore of the island. So again, toward, ad, needs an accusative. You have oram, it fits the bill, right? That's the accusative noun we needed. Insulae here, you can run through the process again. It doesn't make sense being a plural subject, right? Nominative plural. It doesn't make sense being dative. It's going to be genitive because the shore belongs to the island they just sailed to, right? So it's the shore of the island. And Julia, what does she do? She properat, she hastens, right? A navicula, out of the small boat. Notice how it's ablative, navicula, with a long A, because you're showing motion out of something. So she hastens out of the boat in terram. Now here we have an accusative case, prepositional phrase. So it means into the land. Notice that it's accusative because if you think about where she is right now, when she's getting off the boat, she has to be going into the land or onto the land. She's not already there. So we need accusative to show that motion into something, right? In this case, I guess you translate it onto in English. So she hops off the boat and goes onto the island. Now we continue with the last part of this second paragraph to finish the story off. You have casa nautai est proxima aquae. So casa means the hut or the dwelling. It's sort of house, but it probably means something smaller than that. The hut, sure, the cottage, I guess you could say. The hut of the sailor. Nautai is going to be genitive because you're showing whose house it is, right? It's the sailor's house, the one who we said lives on the island. So the house or the hut is proxima. It's nearby. There's our adjective. We're expecting a dative, which explains aquae. Because otherwise, aquae might be, again, nominative plural, genitive singular, or dative singular. You're not sure. But when you put it in the context of proxima, you know it's going to be dative because you're saying the house of the sailor is close to the water, right? Nearby to the water. It's saying that he lives on the shore, I guess, or pretty close to the shore. Poeta et filia ad casam ambulant. So the poet and his daughter, and the daughter, however you want to translate it, right? They ambulant, they walk. Notice the NT because there's two people walking. They walk ad casam, toward the cottage, the hut. Again, ad casam, it's casam is accusative because you're going toward the house, right? It means they're not there yet. They have to walk toward it. You need the accusative prepositional phrase. Then you have Julia in casam properat et nautam saluta. So Julia, the daughter, properat, she hastens in casam, into the house. Again, she's not in it yet. She's going into the house, so it involves the accusative case, right? That's how you express it. So she hastens into the house, and saluta, she greets the nautam, the sailor, right? The sailor who lives there. So she hastens into his little hut or cottage, and she says hello. That's kind of the idea. Postea nauta et Julia in ora ambulant et nauta Juliae fabulas nara. So afterward, meaning after they've done this, I guess, right? They've all entered the house. The nauta, right? Nauta et Julia. So the sailor and Julia, what do? They ambulant, they walk. Where do they walk? In ora, on the shore. It's ablative here because you're saying they're on the shore. They're not walking into the shore, right? That would mean something different. If you put in oram here, accusative, it would mean that they were walking down to the shore. They haven't really gotten there yet. In ora, ablative implies that they're already on the shore and they're just kind of pacing up and down the shoreline, right? So again, it's interesting to pay attention. It's important really to pay attention to what case you're using with prepositional phrases because it does change the meaning. So the sailor and Julia, they walk on the shore, and the nauta, the sailor, narat, he tells. What does he tell? Fabulas, stories. Now, since we had the verb tells, right? Remember verbs of showing, giving, telling, we're expecting a dative because you tell something to someone. So in this case, to break it apart, you're saying the sailor tells. What does he tell? Fabulas, stories. Who does he tell it to? Juliae, dative singular. He tells stories to Julia. Okay? So again, think about that. because Julii, that ending could be nominative plural. It wouldn't make sense to be a plural subject. You don't have a plural verb. Genitive, you'd be saying the sailor of Julia, but she doesn't own the sailor, so again, it doesn't really make sense. The verb narat is giving you the hint that Julii is going to be dative. Okay, so this story, pretty straightforward. The vocab is manageable. You just learn it and go with it. And the grammar is basically what we covered last chapter in chapter 7. So in chapter 7, we're really focused on ablative case prepositional phrases. In this chapter, we're really focusing on accusative, which is why you have so much repetition of people going towards the house, going towards the shore, wherever, right? It's trying to get you to see the difference in meaning when you use an ablative and when you use an accusative. So hopefully it made sense and you feel pretty comfortable with it. If you have any questions at all on anything I did or how I translated it, feel free to put a comment down below and I'd be happy to help you however I can. But otherwise, like I always tell you, just keep reading it, keep practicing, and you'll be fine. Good luck.